Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today we will be doing another painting over my pen sketches video, and this time I am painting another scene from Harry Potter because it is what won the poll on my last one. On the comments of this one, I'm still going to be taking requests for what movie to do next in the series. I'm going to be painting the most upvoted comments, but also I'm going to officially close any more Harry Potter suggestions just so I can make things a little bit more exciting. I've already seen a lot of interesting comments like Lord of the Rings, Game of Thrones, and also some very fun ones like scenes from Everything Everywhere All at Once, and also doing animated series in my style like characters from The Last Airbender, which is my favorite show of all time. So keep the suggestions coming. I think that they're gonna be what makes this series a lot more interesting than it was before, and also it's fun to be introduced to movies that I haven't seen yet. Just in advance, I want to apologize if you guys hear any rumbling. The winds are a little bit crazy at the moment, and my mic might pick up the ocean waves that are right outside my house. So I'm still going to be using my Mia gouache and also still using the same sketchbook. It is my Etcher Lab watercolor sketchbook. This time I've once again included the sketch in my video, and I've also figured out the name of the pen that I was using, and it says Cello Joystick, and so that's what I'm going to be calling it. While I was doing this sketch, I did actually notice that there were a bit of a difference between this and the flex sticks that I normally use, and most of it is just that the flex sticks bleed a lot. Sometimes there would be a lot more ink blots in my sketches than when I use this joystick one, but it still stands that when I go to paint over it with my gouache, they both perform the same way in that they don't bleed out with the gouache over them, and they also hold onto the gouache well, and so that's why I love painting over these pen sketches like this. When it comes to sketching Harry, I just think it was so fun. I think it has a lot to do with the fact that I spent a year drawing Harry Potter characters exclusively, and so most of that is really just Harry. And I also think that he just has a very drawable face, and so it was actually fun to do this sketch, and none of it really stressed me out. I also think that Daniel Radcliffe, especially in his Harry Potter years, is just so easily drawable, and so I was really happy with how the sketch turned out. I do think now that I'm looking at it that it wasn't as good as I initially thought, just for the reason that when I put it side by side with the finished painting, I can see that I've made adjustments to the proportions of his face. And so now that I can compare the two, I think that the sketch isn't maybe as accurate as I thought it was while I was doing it. But still, the sketch was a lot of fun. And another thing that makes it easier is that I think in this series, this is the biggest portrait that I've done. Most of the time, I want to extend the body and see more of the scene. But for this particular one, I really wanted to focus on the look on his face and Sirius's hand holding his head in that way. And I'm going to be talking more about the scene later on when I paint over it. But while I was doing the sketch, I was really happy with how it turned out. It didn't take me a lot of time before I could do the painting stage. When I did go to take out my Mia gouache, as you guys might have noticed, that I didn't take that much time to leave it out to dry before storing it like I did before, and that's just because I am planning on doing more videos in this series. I think it's a lot of fun reading you guys' suggestions, and so I'm not really anticipating storing the gouache for so long before I use it again, so I didn't bother leaving it out to dry this time. Also, you guys might have noticed that I just used the same palette that I used for the last video, and the reason for that is that I knew initially I was going to be painting a lot of the skin tones, and so I'm going to use some of the same colors anyway. But also another thing is that initially, especially in this first passes of paint over the gouache, I'm not really gonna need very bright colors. And because of how the scene looks anyway, I'm fine with these colors contaminating each other at first. I'm also just not very keen on cleaning out my palette, especially if I've just used it recently. The great thing about gouache is that you can reuse your paints that are still there, and as long as it's safe. So yeah, going back to this scene that I painted, I chose to paint this one because since it's going to be my last of the whole movie series, I wanted to dedicate it to my favorite Harry Potter movie, which is The Prisoner of Azkaban. It was also my favorite book out of all 7, and on a side note, I just think that it's such a joy to be an adult when you read Harry Potter, because I had seen the movies as a kid, but I hadn't read the books, and I also was just in that age where I didn't really understand the movies outside of them being fun to watch. So I read the books as an adult, and I just think that the 3rd book made me the most happy, which is actually a little weird because I did rewatch the movie before doing this scene. I wanted to see if it aged as well as I thought it did, and I was really struck by how amazingly they portrayed the Dementors. And also I even forgot the Dementors existed in this movie because I just remember it officially being the last quote-unquote happy book in the series. So yeah, it was weird that what I considered that had what are supposed to be the most depressing creatures featured on it. But for a while I actually did want to paint a scene with the Dementors on it just because of how well they really designed the look of it, and just the movement that they make I think is so gorgeous, and I just love how it was portrayed in the movie. But in the end, I wanted a scene that captures the reasons why I think it was such a good movie, and for that I had to somehow include Sirius in the scene because his return really felt like Harry meeting the closest thing maybe to a family member that he had before he lost his parents. So I really wanted Sirius in the scene, but I also just wanted it mostly to be Harry just because it's going to be my last one from any of the movies. So I just think that this scene is perfect for that. Another reason why I love this movie is just the quality in the movie itself. I love the colors and the way they're shot. I also saw that the director for the movie was Alfonso Cuarón, and that is just crazy to me. Like, with the movies, they really didn't spare any of expenses. They all looked great. I just especially think that the 3rd movie is the best. And I talked about the night scenes and why I love them. I really loved the moonlight scenes where it was just a lot of cool colors together. I wanted to capture that on my painting, and so I used a lot of this blue that is in the Mia gouache that I actually don't use that much. And it struck me because I use Prussian blue a lot, but I don't actually use other kinds of blue in my paintings. So in this case, I really wanted to capture that. What made it challenging was this blue cast over the whole night scenes really affected how his skin tone looked, and so it was hard for me to figure out how to mix those colors. I think for the skin tones, I used a lot more green than I normally would. But also there are spots on his face that I wanted to look warm because I did want his face to stand out over the whole scene. And I think that was the only thing that I sort of adjusted from the actual screen grab of the movie. Everything else I wanted to look exactly the same. I just really love the lighting in the scene and how well you can still see them, but still it all still looks very cool and blue. And I wanted to capture that mostly in my painting. So for this one, unlike the other videos in this series, there was no debating whether I should add the background or not. I really wanted those dark values in there to sort of reinforce the scene more, and also just to make his face stand out more, even if it's just with the values. I think that just by going off of how much black I used, this may be my darkest painting yet. And also because everything else is sort of has this blue cast to it, I wasn't really scared about using pure black by itself. But because of how everything is almost uniform in hues, I had to use that black to make some of the shapes stand out more. You see, I'm using a bigger brush for the initial passes of color in the background. I didn't want to add too many details to it. I really just wanted the sole focus in the scene to be his eyes. And also Sirius's hands cradling his face like that. I just really loved that point of contact in the scene. While I was approaching this very last stages where I'm adding more fresh paint, and that means that I will be using more vibrant colors that I don't want to contaminate each other. When I reached that stage is when it struck me how little pure white is used in the scene. So the bright highlights that are sort of running across the silhouettes in the background, I used a lot of the blue with the white, but not really just pure white. I think the only times that I did use pure white was to make his eyes stand out more, and also some of the highlights on his glasses. And that's not a choice that I personally made to make to bring more attention to those areas. That is just how the scene was filmed, and I think that's so beautiful. Also, talking about the eyes, there is one other thing that I did change, and I almost forgot about it, but I did try to make his eyes look more green than blue, and because his eyes in the books are green, and I just wanted to capture that more. That very small thing was actually hard for me to get because of how blue everything else in the scene. It was hard for me to try to think of what green eyes are gonna look like in the same lighting environment without making it look like it's out of place. I think in the end what I did was just add a lot of yellow instead of actually just green, and I just strategically put it on some parts of his irises, not really the whole thing. Most of it was really just gray and blue anyway. But I think that adding those yellow pops of color sort of just slightly nudged it towards being green instead of blue. After that, it was just a matter of me readjusting some of the details of his face to capture just the exact expression that Harry was making. And they're really so tiny that I don't think it would look like it's changing that much if you're just looking at where I'm painting. But it's those tiny readjustments that make it go from Harry is smiling to make it look closer to suggest that Harry isn't really smiling as much as I was painting it. In the scene, it looks kind of more bittersweet because Sirius is leaving him, and also it's just Sirius's hand that is pushing Harry's mouth up a little bit. It's just that and other tiny things that I had to do to his face. But after that, it was the end of the painting. So that is it for this video. Thank you everyone for watching. Don't forget to leave out your suggestions in the comments and to like your favorite suggestions of the comments that are already in there. I will be sketching that and painting over it for my next video in the series. But yeah, thank you to my patrons for supporting me. I will be seeing you guys again soon.